All right. Hello, everyone. Trying something a little bit different because I have successfully messed up a number of videos at this point because I'm a bit of a boomer that I had to delete and redo and back and forth and over again. So hopefully this angle and setup will actually pick up all of the things that I say this time. So here we go. This video is going to be book recommendations from last year, from 2021. Christian books that I read. There were other books I read that were history or fiction. I'm not going to recommend, just because that's not what I'm doing on this channel or in the Discord or anything like that. So not going to worry about those. But these books, I think, are worth your time, and we all have a limited amount of that. And so I'm not going to recommend anything that I don't think you should take the time to read through, think about, and churn over in your mind. One thing to remember is that there are many books, and not all books are worth reading. Books are tools to help us master the book, the Bible. They are not ends in themselves. They can be read for fun and read for entertainment purposes, but in terms of the books that I'm going to recommend to you, they're books that are designed, I think, and are good for helping you live the Christian life in accordance with God's Word. So, that being said, starting off with first book, A Christian Manifesto by Francis Schaeffer. This book is what it sounds like. It's a Christian manifesto as opposed to the Communist Manifesto. And while Schaeffer wrote it to his time and culture, which was not that long ago, and in many ways he saw where it was heading to the point where it is now with us. And in that regard, this book is excellent because it, in many ways, is forthtelling of where things have gone and where they're going, and a Christian response to them. So I highly recommend Schaeffer's, Christian Manifesto for those reasons. Next book is The Forgotten Trinity by James R. White. And this is my second time through this book. I read it as part of my preparation to teach on the Trinity next year. Well, this year now. At some point, I want to do that. Still preparing, still reading, still studying, but this is the best book that I've read so far on it. As far as the introduction goes, I know there's a revised and expanded version out now. I haven't read that one, but I'm confident that it's good still. But that's the version you would probably get if you got it. This one's pretty short, and it is the only one that I ran across that provided a definition out the gate and then attempted to defend that definition from biblical texts to show how Trinity is not being read into the text. It's not just a tradition. It is something that is to be believed because the Bible teaches it. Excellent book. Next one. Ichabod S. Spencer, A Pastor's Sketches, Volume 1. I haven't read Volume 2 yet. I'll read it next year. This was sort of a read that I chipped away at over time last year, and it's excellent. If you do evangelism, which if you're a Christian, that's you. If you are in pastoral ministry or thinking about heading there, I highly recommend Ichabod's example in his evangelism. So the book is his collection of sketches of conversations with, as the subtitle says, anxious inquirers respecting the way of salvation. There are some heartbreaking stories, not all of them end well. There are some heartwarming stories in which people come to know Christ and come to the gospel. And it's a great book. Multiple times, tears were shed. Highly recommend. But also following his example in the way that he answers their questions, the way that he deals with people in their different situations. is, I think, very biblical and wise and a good model for us to follow. The next 3 books are the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis, Out on the Silent Planet, Perelandra, and That Hideous Strength. I recommend all 3 because they go together. However, if I have to recommend one out of all of them, it would be Perelandra. I think it's the best one, though That Hideous Strength and Perelandra are, if they weren't so different, I would not, I almost don't put them in competition. That Hideous Strength is my favorite in almost a different genre. Even though they're all science fiction, That Hideous Strength goes into kind of dystopian novel, and Perelandra is almost just pure sci-fi. And yeah. So I recommend all of it. Out on Silent Planet is slow and might take some time to get through, but it sets the stage for the rest of it, and so it's worth reading. It's also the shortest one out of the 3, so give it a shot. They're great books. Very on the nose with some of the imagery, but that's C.S. Lewis for you. It makes it easier. But very Christian in the message, and as always, I think Lewis's theology is better in his fiction than it is in his nonfiction. Go figure. Presuppositional Apologetics. Oh, there we go. Stated and Defended by Greg L. Monson. Second time through this one as well, preparing to teach apologetics earlier last year, and excellent book. Highly recommend it for a introduction to presuppositional apologetics and it being defended biblically, because that's the important thing. Our apologetic method should be informed by the Bible, and I think Bonson does a great job doing that in that book. So check it out. If you want a book that I read last year as a sort of easier introduction, because Bonson is not the easiest person to read in the world, though he is easier to read than others. Jason Lyle's Ultimate Proof of Creation is an excellent introduction to the same subject, but I read it last year, so read both. I think they're both good, both great. The next 3 books are sort of in a series for a reason, as you'll see, that I read almost all around the same time, preparing to teach on the subject of justification by faith alone, sola fide. And fittingly, this first one is Here I Stand, A Life of Martin Luther by Roland H. Bainton. Great book. It's a biography, so if you like that, check it out and get to know the great reformer himself. This one, Faith Alone, The Evangelical Doctrine of Justification by R.C. Sproul. This book is a little bit a bridge between the next book and the last book, because it's a historical study of the doctrine of justification in the time of the reformers versus justification among the Roman Catholics, and how that issue divided them in such a way that there could not be reconciling, that the Reformation had to split off from the Roman Catholic Church because of this issue, if not others, but this issue of justification. And he's responding to a statement that was made, a document that was created back in the 90s called Evangelicals and Catholics Together. And it dropped the alone in justification by faith. And Sproul rightly took great issue with this. And so there's a lot of engagement with the people who signed it and who created that document. So there's a lot of historical stuff going on in the book. And he mostly focuses on not defending the doctrine of justification, but defining it the way it was defined in the Reformation. So you won't find a lot of exegesis in here. You will find biblical text reference, but you won't find a lot of direct exegesis or exegetical defense of justification, but you will find sufficient history to help you understand and become, hopefully, a Protestant by conviction and not just by circumstance. The easiest way to become Roman Catholic is to be a Protestant simply by birth, or by birthplace, or by circumstance. Be Protestant by conviction. Understand the doctrine of sola fide and believe it because the Bible teaches it, but believe it in such a way that it is a deep conviction, and this book can help with that. Speaking of books that can help with that, James R. White, The God Who Justifies. Second book by Dr. White on here, but this one I have not read 2 times, only once. And this one is a exegetical defense of the doctrine of justification. A clear definition, the other theological truths that intertwine with it, like imputation, and then a walkthrough of biblical text and a response to those texts that might seem to conflict with it, like the book of James, for example. That's often the counter argument that's brought forth is, well, doesn't James say that we're not justified by faith alone? Answers in here. Excellent book. Of all of them, if I could tell you, pick one book and read it, probably that one. As the back of the book says, it's the heart of the gospel. If you don't understand justification by faith alone, or if that's a new concept, or if you don't believe it and need convincing, check that book out. Here is another one, Slaying Leviathan by Glenn Sunshine. Very relevant to our cultural circumstance. This is a book that covers the history of limited government and resistance to governments in the Christian tradition. It focuses on Protestant resistance theory. I won't spoil it for you, but it's a history book more than it is a Bible book, but it does deal with some of the biblical text, or rather how Christians historically have understood something like Romans 13 and how they've applied it to their context and to their governments. And since we are in a situation at the moment that calls for us to think through those things, that we are always, as Christians, really in that situation. But a lot of us didn't think about it until recently, especially our Canadian brothers and sisters who are dealing with a government who is very willing and ready to arrest you or fine you over saying the truth out loud regarding God's design for gender and things of that nature. Then a good read there. And last, Competent to Counsel by J.E. Adams. This one's very shiny and isn't showing up well. There we go. An Introduction to Nouthetic Counseling. This book is, I think, great. It's his foundational work on the subject. There's a longer theological defense of it that I have but haven't read yet. But this is the first Adams book that I really dove into. And I enjoyed it a lot. And I thought it was very good in answering the question, what is counseling biblically speaking? Who does it? Who's qualified to do it? And then how should it be done? And I won't spoil the rest. Get the book. Read it. It's very helpful. If you've ever benefited from a pastor just walking you through whatever it is you're going through in life with a Bible in hand, and you want to be able to do that for someone else, you can. And that's the whole point of the title, Competent to Counsel. I highly recommend the book. Okay. Well, that's it. That is all that I have for book recommendations from 2021. As I read this year, I will try to make a video on any books that I find that I think are worth your time. I will do a book review or something of them, of those books, and recommend them that way as I go. And I'll do a top list at the end of the year as well. Next year, Lord willing. All right, well, and that is all. Let me figure this part out. And done. Goodbye.